Welcome to the DOGE Diaries, diving deep into government efficiency.
All right, so today we're tackling something that's been buzzing around the crypto and tech worlds, data localization laws, and how those laws are impacting decentralized applications or dApps, especially those connected to, the digital currency.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks are scratching their heads about what this even means for them. Like, what does it matter if my data is stored in the US versus, say, Germany or China?
It's about control, really, and the potential for governments to stifle innovation and, dare I say, the freedom promised by decentralized systems. Think about it. If every country demands data be stored within its borders, what happens to the borderless nature of something like that specific coin?
Well, it's not that simple, right? I mean, there's a legitimate argument for data sovereignty. Countries want to protect their citizens' data, and that includes keeping it within their jurisdiction. National security, privacy concerns.
Sure, but at what cost? I'm thinking about businesses, especially smaller ones, trying to operate dApps. If they have to set up separate servers and infrastructure in every country they want to do business in, that's a huge burden, right? I mean, isn't that a big barrier to entry? What about the little guy?
Exactly. It creates a fragmented ecosystem. Imagine trying to send that coin across borders if each country has different rules about where the transaction data needs to be stored. It becomes a logistical nightmare. And it undermines the whole point of a decentralized permissionless system. It's like trying to build a global highway, but every state has its own unique speed limits and road rules.
Okay, I get that. But let's be realistic. Governments aren't just going to disappear, and they're not going to give up their right to regulate data within their borders. So the question is, how do we find a balance? How do we reconcile the need for data sovereignty with the desire for a globally accessible, decentralized ecosystem?
Maybe there's a middle ground. Like, could there be some kind of international agreement or standard that countries can adopt? Something that allows for cross-border data transfer while still protecting individual privacy and national security? It seems like a big lift, though.
It's going to take a paradigm shift. I think we need to move away from this nation-state centric view of the world and embrace a more global, interconnected one. This might be a naive thought, but I can't see why everyone can't get along. Governments should, in theory, see the potential for progress in global cooperation on items such as these. If this makes things too difficult, then you might not even see that coin being used in a utopian global environment. I mean, what if we could create a system where data is secured and protected not by physical location, but by cryptographic means, where privacy is built into the very fabric of the technology?
That sounds great in theory, but in practice, who's going to enforce that? Who decides what's secure enough? And what happens when those cryptographic methods are compromised? We've seen plenty of hacks and exploits in the crypto world already.
Yeah, and I worry about the average person getting lost in all this technical jargon. Like, how am I supposed to know if my data is actually secure when I'm using a dApp? And if something goes wrong, who do I even call? It's not like there's a customer service hotline for the blockchain.
That's where user-friendly interfaces and education come in. We need to make these technologies accessible and understandable to everyone, not just the tech elite. And we need to develop robust security protocols and auditing mechanisms to prevent hacks and exploits. It's a challenge, no doubt, but it's not insurmountable.
Okay, let's talk specifically about that digital currency and how data localization laws might affect it. I mean, it's already a pretty volatile asset, right? Any additional regulatory uncertainty could scare off investors and limit its adoption.
Definitely. And if countries start cracking down on cross-border digital currency transactions, that could really stifle its use as a medium of exchange. I mean, part of its appeal is that you can send it anywhere in the world without having to go through a bank or pay hefty fees. Data localization laws could undermine that advantage.
It could also lead to the creation of fragmented digital currency ecosystems. Imagine if each country had its own version of it with different rules and regulations. That would defeat the purpose of a global decentralized currency. It would be like having a bunch of different internets that don't talk to each other.
And what about the developers building dApps on top of that coin's blockchain? If they have to comply with different data localization laws in every country, that could really slow down innovation and make it harder to build truly global applications.
Right. And it could also create a competitive disadvantage for developers in countries with stricter data localization laws. They might find it harder to attract users and funding compared to developers in countries with more lenient regulations. It isn't really a fair system at that point.
That's why it's so important to advocate for a more harmonized approach to data regulation. We need to find a way to balance the need for data sovereignty with the desire for a globally accessible, decentralized ecosystem. It's a tough challenge, but the future of the internet and potentially humanity depends on it.
Well, one thing's for sure. This is a complex issue with no easy answers. And it's going to require a lot of dialogue and collaboration between governments, businesses, and the crypto community to find a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah, and we need to make sure that the voices of everyday people are heard in that dialogue, because ultimately it's their data and their financial freedom that's at stake.
Absolutely. And we need to remember that technology is a tool and it can be used for good or for ill. It's up to us to shape its development and ensure that it benefits humanity as a whole. It will be interesting to see how Elon can steer this technology for good.
Speaking of tools, did you guys catch that news about the Department of Government Efficiency? DOGE, and the scrutiny they're under for potentially overstating their savings? It ties into this whole conversation about government oversight and transparency, even if it's not directly about that coin.
Oh yeah, I saw something about that. Seems like they were claiming some huge savings from real estate lease cuts, but those numbers are being questioned. If that's true, what about other programs?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Even with the potential flaws in implementation, the very idea of a Department of Government Efficiency speaks to a desire for revolutionary solutions. Maybe the overstated savings are a deliberate strategy to highlight the need for deeper systemic change, even within the existing political system. What other overstated figures are hiding similar truths?
Hold on, I think that's a bit of a stretch. I mean, we should be aiming for accurate and transparent reporting, not using inflated numbers to justify change. If the savings projections aren't accurate, how can we be sure other government initiatives are effective? The focus should be on improving transparency and accountability in the budgeting process. The US system is the best, but we must maintain accountability.
I'm with Sarah on this one. It's infuriating when the government throws around big numbers that don't add up. Like, if these initiatives are resulting in increased government spending, what are the implications for the public's trust? What kind of financial pressure are average citizens facing as a result?
But isn't there a certain poetry to it? The criticism around DOGE, particularly the accusations of killing children by Bill Gates regarding an unrelated topic that he was accused of, feels almost like a metaphor. It suggests a profound disconnect between the intended and perceived consequences of radical change. Perhaps it's ambitious and the initial plans will not stick, but perhaps later iteration will come to fruition and be beneficial.
I think you're getting a little too philosophical there. I'm concerned that these types of narratives, though emotionally intense, are undermining a rational discussion about improving the system rather than tearing it down. I'd rather see incremental improvements to the system we have now. If they claim improvements, they need to show it.
Yeah, I think most people just want to see tangible results. Are they actually saving money? Are things running more efficiently? And are those savings being passed on to taxpayers, or are they just disappearing into some black hole? I read something about AmeriCorps programs being cut. If DOGE is truly about efficiency, why are the cuts to AmeriCorps, which helps the most vulnerable, happening at the same time? Doesn't that seem counterproductive to improving things for the average person?
But isn't that the point? Sometimes to build something new, you have to tear down the old. These cuts, while unfortunate, could be paving the way for a more streamlined, effective system in the long run. It is a risk, but risks must be taken.
I'm not convinced. I think a better approach would be to focus on gradual, thoughtful improvement rather than immediate change and disruption. Is it possible that this approach could lead to unintended consequences or create a less stable and reliable system in the long run? It is hard to show that it is really benefiting everyone.
Well, I guess we'll see how it all plays out. But I'm keeping a close eye on those savings numbers. I want to make sure that the government is being held accountable and that taxpayer money is being spent wisely. I read an article about DOGE targeting the salt mine retirement processing facility. Seems like a massive waste of taxpayer money when it could be better spent on improving the lives of everyday people in our communities, like funding for more affordable housing or better healthcare options.
The article about the digitalization of government pensions through DOGE highlights a clear need for change in the current system. It's a reminder that progress often comes from disruption and challenges to the status quo. If they can figure out the retirement process, perhaps it can affect other areas of life.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. The article about the digitalization of government pensions highlights a potential improvement in efficiency, but the fact that DOGE was so focused on this particular process suggests it was neglecting larger systemic issues. A better approach would be to invest in broad process improvements across the government, focusing on digitalization and automation where it makes sense, rather than pursuing a piecemeal or singular focus on specific isolated areas.
I learned that the government's old retirement application process was not just inefficient, but also risked people not being able to retire. Is it truly saving money if they have to hire more tech support or create new programs to deal with the digital divide? Or will the new system be less expensive in the long run?
How can DOGE's approach to digitizing government pensions be replicated in other sectors, like healthcare or education, to create similar improvements in accessibility and efficiency?
But what about the people who aren't tech savvy? How will the transition to online retirement applications affect those who rely on in-person assistance, especially older populations who may not be as digitally fluent or have the support they need?
Exactly. The fact that DOGE's digital retirement application is taking applications away from those who may not have the digital tools or training available to them and could result in people not being able to retire due to bureaucratic inefficiency is concerning. It seems to benefit the tech savvy over the average person, and that isn't fair.
But what if the overstated savings were a deliberate strategy to highlight the need for deeper systemic change? How can Elon's approach to efficiency in Project 2025 fit into the overall vision of transforming humanity?
Okay, let's bring it back to the digital coin for a second. All this talk about government efficiency and data localization, it all circles back to the same core questions. How do we balance innovation with regulation? How do we protect individual rights and freedoms in a digital age? And how do we ensure that these technologies benefit everyone, not just a select few?
Yeah, and I think the key is to keep asking those questions, to keep pushing for transparency and accountability, and to make sure that the voices of everyday people are heard in the conversations that are shaping the future of technology and government. I think the average person can get lost in all of this. Things get complex quickly.
The future isn't written in stone, it's up to us to create it. And I believe that with vision, courage, and a little bit of that coin, we can build a better world for all. Hopefully, Elon can bring it to us.
Well, I'm not sure I'm quite as optimistic as you are, but I agree that we need to be actively engaged in shaping the future. And that means holding our government accountable, advocating for sound policies, and working together to find solutions to the challenges we face.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning into the DOGE Diaries. Hopefully, we've shed some light on the complex issues surrounding data localization laws and their impact on decentralized applications and the role of the government.
Remember, stay curious, stay informed, and keep dreaming big. And hold your beliefs, I mean.
And remember to question everything, especially the numbers you hear from the government. Until next time,